I want to ask Nick something to start off because like this is the most important thing. Well, the year was in the middle of obviously. So when the media scrum with Punk,
right?
Okay, now people are like speculating something. Did you and Punk have any interaction before he started off the scrum by pointing you out and you know the way it started?
No,
because the thing is, people think that's there was like a work because Nick Hausman, and I'm like saying because here I'm going to give you my take. I don't want to tell if you get the same vibe I did.
Okay,
because I think Punk sat in that room and had known like for the past like few weeks he's been having some bad press, like people writing stories about him and stuff. The thing with that, him goes. But I thought the vibe was that Punk knew that he had all the dirt sheet guys there in the room together and kind of was going to go on the offensive and get his in back at the dirt sheet guys. And like just started with you because like he knew you and Colt did the comedy together and everything. It was like pointing you out to try to that was like the first blow and then the way it started, like the genesis of it. Do you agree with that? That kind of like, did you get that vibe from it?
I mean, yeah. I mean, when the guy says you blew my spot, I mean, you could tell he had an agenda, right?
Right, exactly. Because he was going to say, "Hey, right."
Yeah.
And you were like, "No, I don't really talk to Colt anymore. We don't see like I was friends with him, but like right, go ahead."
Well, but I think but that's the thing is I have had people say that to me, and like that's what I point to is because it's very and no, I never talked to Punk, at least not that day. The last time I saw him in person was at the trial, or maybe we shared Scrum space and other pay-per-views. But it very much felt like this is a wrestler who's laid out how he wants this scrum to go, or at least this opening promo, spot by spot, move by move, and you get into the match, and you go to lock up, and I drop down, and you're just left there grasping air, and that's how you start the match, right? You blew my spot, right?
Right, yeah.
And so I wonder how different things could have been if I was actually still friends with Scott Colton. Right? Because then he could have got his aha moment, could have buried me, could have gone after Dave, and maybe he wouldn't have gone after the locker room and the EVPs as much as he did if he'd have been able to satiate his anger by taking it out on the press. So it was a botch spot. It was and truthfully, I talked to Dave Meltzer earlier this week for Wrestling Inc. Earlier this week, late last week, one of those two, and it was interesting because he was telling me how he wishes he had been able to tell Punk before that scrum, no, the Bucks were not DMing me about Colt Cabana, right? And I'm like, dude, I wish I could have told Punk before the scrum, no, I'm not friends with Colt Cabana, because when you put those two facts side by side, you kind of realize that Punk walked into this thing, without all of his facts.
With misinformation.
Yeah, exactly, right?
But he's getting his stuff from the dirt sheets. Well, so it's like, but that's the thing. That's like, you read stuff about you and like, okay, he's not fact checking. He's not, so he's just assuming and like, okay, I got all these guys here. Now I'm going to get my shit in. You guys wrote stuff about me and I'm going to get my shit about you guys. But like, I thought that, the stuff of people saying, well, it's a work. He cleared this. That did not come across like that at all to me, especially like against the people. What were the people in the room? Like, when you guys were in the room, because we didn't see you, right? Was everybody just kind of like giving that look at each other, like, what is going on here? Like, did you ever like what were the looks like where people like you're making eye contact with somebody, go like, can you believe what's going on here? Like, what, how did that go?
I honestly couldn't tell you how everybody else looked because I was front row center. I didn't have a camera in front of me, and I couldn't break eye contact with Punk. Like, I wasn't looking around. Like, I was just so in that moment, it's just like a once in a lifetime experience. Like, what's going on right now? I was never upset about it. And like, that was another thing kind of commiserating with Dave about this is Dave's like, I like Punk too. And I'm like, yeah, I don't know why he was going after me. Like, I don't dislike this guy, and I
don't think he was going after you.
Yeah.
I think he was using you because you knew Colt, and that was his way of like, okay, I'm going to get this Colt story out, and Nick Hausman's the guy that like, because like you guys are getting your stuff from Colt. Mm-hmm. He's friendly with you, so you're getting his side of the story. That's what I thought he's like, but when you kind of like shut him down, he decided to say, well, I'm still going to get this out.
You gotta remember too, and Punk's defense here, and I'm not trying to like defend or whatever, because I like Punk. I don't really have any issue with what happened here, but I'm the Chicago pro wrestling guy. My beat is CM Punk and Colt Cabana, right? These are my backyard guys.
right? Yeah.
I've worked with Cabana in the past. Punk did used to come to our improv shows. We all know each other very, very well. But I hadn't talked to Punk in a while. But I was the one to ask him in the scrums about the Hangman Page comments. Right. I was the one to ask Tony Khan about the Colt Cabana Ring of Honor rumor. Right. I was the one tracking the story just because I knew there was something there. I had no idea how much was there, and how we all know. But, if you don't know, like, if you think that, like, I'm on Scott's side or whatever, and the only reason I'm asking these questions is try to spin a narrative against you, because that's not what I was doing. I didn't have an agenda.
Bro, Eric Bischoff had said on one of his podcasts, I think, that, like, you were, like, one of the only guys in those scrums that asks challenging questions.
Right.
The scrums are a joke to me. I mean, bro, honestly, it's an embarrassment for the wrestling journalistic industry that these guys are just like acting like asking questions that like 15-year-old Marks would ask, it's everything.
Like,
that you actually kind of like ask
feel or like that, or how does your boot feel? Well, remember
that was Dave. I mean, that was Dave.
Bro, there's so many questions that you could ask these guys, and like from a that would have been challenging questions. And like you're one of the few people that like you said, you ask about Colt Cabana and stuff like. Bro, I think you've asked some questions where Tony said, I don't want to just. Didn't you ask about MGF one time?
I asked him about MJF twice.
And what is his response?
No comment both times, and then let me ask.
Come on. I mean, seriously, but at least you're asking, because like these things, these guys, these scrums, they come across as like the journalists don't want to ask Tony any tough questions because he might get mad at him and not invite him back to the scrum. That's what the whole thing kind of seems like to me. But when you guys ask like a challenging question, like, okay, that's a good question. That's like, I got no comment. All right.
And the thing about it, at least from my perspective, because I've been to every single AEW Ring of Honor scrum ever, right? Mm-hmm. I don't understand that particular narrative because I've never had anybody from AEW PR or Tony Khan come up to me and say anything about anything I've ever asked or ask me to take anything out. If anything, they're really nice to me. Like, I like the AEW PR people a lot. I like to think we have a pretty good relationship, Right. So like when people show up and they don't, show up to work, like I don't get that. Like, you've got a moment here. You've got a chance to do something. You've got a chance to ask something that's going to create a conversation or answer a big question or whatever. Like if you're not taking that moment, that's on you. I don't get it, but I'm there to work and, pay my bills and, make Wrestling Inc. the best website, out there. So that's my attitude towards it. I don't share the fear that others do.
You can tell there's fear in these guys because they're marking, they're being nice. They don't want to. It's like, it's absurd.
Not only that, Di, but there was actually someone who asked a question at that scrum that was like, "This is the most intimidated I've ever felt at a press conference or something like that." So they were admitting it that they were scared at that actual scrum.
Yeah,
and I think too is I have a lot of respect for professional wrestlers. And I care about the industry, and I want wrestlers to be taken care of, and I want wrestlers to be happy. But my best friends are not pro wrestlers. My best friends are like lawyers or salespeople that I met.
Grew up with.
Yeah, And so when I'm in a scrum, I'm not here to be your friend. Like, we both have jobs. My job is to ask questions of note, and your job is to be this awesome subject where people give a shit about what you're saying. And that's the job.
When I was on Nick's show, he had a very interesting take and theory that because I was like, well, who do you think's gonna get fired, CM Punk or the Young Bucks and Omega? And I thought CM Punk would, and he thought it would be the Young Bucks and Omega. Give me the arguments that you gave me why you thought that he would stay with CM Punk. The first one being that he's a big CM Punk fan. That's who he always wanted.
Yeah, and I don't want to see anybody. To be fair, I hope everybody come back to the table.
Right, me too. Me too. But you made some valid points that are worth bringing up.
Yeah, and just early on, I had immediately heard that Tony just really, really wanted CM Punk. There were a lot of overtures made to CM Punk, and there were conversations, even from I think that Punk may have been in the room for the All In press conference. I don't think he ever had any intention of doing that show, but he was always kind of in that mix, right? And
I also want to say this early on when they first started. I'm talking about like their first show. I was like, "Are you guys going to get CM Punk or not?" This is the Young Bucks, and they were like, "Yeah, we really want him, but he's too expensive." So they always wanted him from day one. But go ahead.
And so, there was that, and then it didn't work out. And then I definitely feel like there was some friction there. And it was interesting timing because Colt Cabana.
Why did you get the feeling there was friction?
Because Tony couldn't buy it. Tony couldn't make a deal, right? And we know kind of in retrospect, if we believe Tony at his word, he had about a $25 million budget, for the roster out of the gate for the first year. Jericho, I'm sure, took a big chunk. Cody, the Bucks, Omega. You're only playing with so much money at that time. I think Moxley was in the mix. Yeah. So it could make the deal. And Punk, for his, to his credit, if you take him at his word, just wanted to make sure he wasn't going to be attaching himself to a cart with creaky wheels that was going to fall apart when you try to get across the river. So, there was some friction from what I gleaned. And, it was interesting timing around then. That's when Colt Cabana got brought in. Never got the All Elite graphic, just kind of was announced as part of the roster by Tony Khan in a scrum. And I was like, wow. I remember thinking at the time, because I just...
And not only that, was never really used well.
No, he was like an agent, and it was...
No, he didn't even fit in that Dark Order club, And if Brody had lived, we would have maybe seen where the story was going with Scott, at that point, because they were great. But whatever. It was just interesting. I was like, man, because I think gone through the trial. All right, I had already gone through the trial, and I remember how bad the fallout was. And I remember hearing things. I never quite knew the story, like obviously we all do now. But I knew there was tension, and I thought that was an interesting sign. But anyway, when Punk came in, obviously Tony gave him everything, and Tony has been nonstop hype for this guy. The only people that have said anything like negative openly was like Adam Page in that promo, right? Mm-hmm. But like nonstop hype machine for this guy. And I think Tony wants Punk there. I think Punk sees the value in Punk there. Obviously didn't try to stop Punk from what he was saying at the scrum, which I thought was interesting. I don't know. I haven't talked to Tony. I would love to talk to Tony so we can figure this all out. But did Tony? You asked me, did I talk to Punk before the scrum? No. Oh yeah, you told me you thought Tony knew this was going to happen.
Well, but do you think Tony Khan was completely caught off guard by Punk?
Of course he was. There's no way he thought that was here's the gist of what I think Punk would have said to Tony. Hey, I might shoot a little bit out there. Try and that's it. Tony Tony wouldn't say because probably do that. It'll get good. But I'm thinking what are you going to say? Right?
There's these little interactions though, because Punk references how Tony had the opportunity to clear the air about all of this when I asked him the question on the call about Cabana and Ring of Honor, and Tony Khan said no comment, moved on. Punk seemed to have taken issue with Tony doing that because now Punk was in a position to, in his way, address this situation on the record. And did anybody expect it to go maybe as far as it did? Probably not, right? But I don't know that Tony didn't know how frustrated Punk was in this situation and know that Punk was going to go out there and address this situation. I mean, in that moment,
he's obviously very sensitive.
Well, especially after
where this came from.
Especially after he did it live on TV a few days before. He mentioned Paige and all that.
And that's the thing is I'm not in the locker room. I don't know how weird it was getting, with these guys in Punk, who wants to share space, who wants to talk to who, all of that kind of backstage stuff. I'm not positive, but on its face, even I could tell something was coming. I mean, that calling out Adam Page thing was weird. And then he did those vindictive snow angels in the middle of the ring. Like he was king, the king of all pro wrestling, and no one could touch him in that moment. I don't know. But again, I'd like to talk to Tony. It's all speculation, so I can talk to somebody about it.
Well, when is the next scrum?
It'll be Full Gear.
Yeah, after
Full Gear. When is that?
November.
November?
Yeah.
Yeah, because I'll be honest with you, bro. It's like these guys kind of Tony Khan is kind of getting a pass from the press. Like they're not pressing him on things, and like you're one of the only ones, right? Because I'll go back, I'll go back something that still hasn't been resolved, right? We saw Matt Hardy slam his head on the concrete and get knocked out and get dazed and everything. Bro, to this day, Tony Khan's official story is Matt Hardy did not have a concussion. Like that has not been cleared out. Nobody as they say, okay, everybody's like, fine. Nobody's going to press him on that. Like really, dude, we're going to you can't let these guys, if it's going to be press and you're going to be journalists, you gotta push back on the narratives. And stuff like it just seems like Tony Khan gets his narrative over all the time. And like you're one of the only voices that will even bring up a challenging question, because all these people, it's like it just comes across to people that the media and these guys are kind of in on it with Tony. And I don't think that's healthy for this business, because what you're going to get is just one big giant echo chamber. And it's not healthy for the business, especially when you're the number 2 company and your ratings are kind of underwhelming. So I think it works against you. What do you think of that?
I mean, look, I agree. I wish more people would show up and ask some more pressing questions sometimes.
Right.
But again, I'm just doing what I think is right. And I don't know if that, it's interesting with wrestling press, because you can pick the outlets you want to talk to, right? You can do your interviews here and there. And again, I've never been approached by AEW PR or Tony Khan or anybody, but maybe I would get more time with people if I didn't ask all the questions that I asked, right. but that's their prerogative and they don't shut me out. And I appreciate that. With WWE, I also have a great relationship with them. Very similarly, I think they would prefer, just to be candid, their wrestling interviews on Vanity Fair or Cosmo, or they already have the wrestling audience. They don't shut me out, and I get the access, and I appreciate it. But yeah, I don't know, man. It's just a weird space. It's very different than it's definitely different than any other kind of genre.
Let's talk